Okay, here we go. In the very rear part of the van, a space heater on a low setting. Hopefully that motor isn't too annoying. And the temperature is slowly dropping below 20 degrees. I'm not sure exactly what it is right now, but they're expecting 10 degrees overnight. So this is probably the most extreme place as far as being cramped and extreme temperature that I've napped in so far. So this should be good. This is Hornstone. Some very nice slabs. A gift to me from a friend of mine. Thank you very much, Vernon. I already started a little bit off camera just to get the positioning right here. It's a very narrow space. I'm tempted to do this whole thing with indirect percussion. Now I watch some guys when they do indirect percussion, you can tell that they are pulling upward when they strike. I don't know how they're doing it, maybe with pressure, but it seems to go upward like this. There's no need to put that much pressure on it when you strike. You might be getting long flakes, so if you are, then I guess it's okay. Everybody's a little bit different. But with good stone, you shouldn't have to use much effort at all with indirect percussion. You shouldn't have to have any kind of pressure assist. Now this is a steel rod. For those of you who are new, that don't know what metal that is, it's a steel rod from the hardware store or the depot store, whatever you want to call it. And the way I work slabs, this is a slab, let's see, the way I work it is just randomly. No set procedure. Okay, a little over a half inch. Right, 16th over a half inch, that's 9/16. Let's do it in millimeters here. 14. By, let's see, 83. I don't feel like doing the math right now. Definitely better than 4-to-1, I think. Let's see, yeah. So it's already as thin as some artifacts are as far as ratio goes. But I always work the ends first. Always. I never run a pass down each side or whatever if the ends are thick. Thin down the ends first and then run your passes. And make sure you run your passes on the thin ends also. That way you can maintain, thick in the middle and thin on the ends. I've seen some guys run little bitty flakes on the ends when they're doing their pass. They'll run little bitty flakes here, and then big old wonking flakes in the middle, and then little bitty flakes here on the ends, and then they turn it, and it's flat again. You don't want it to be flat. You want it to be rounded. Even if you have to leave some of the original surface, wait till it gets more narrow before you start sending flakes past halfway. You don't need to thin this, right? It's already thin. You don't need to send flakes halfway. Not yet. Just wait until you get toward the end when you're more narrow. That's my strategy. I think I've said that over and over again. Wait till it gets more narrow before you start sending in flakes, cosmetic flakes. When you have a nodule and a stick in the middle, you can send big old flakes down through the middle. But you have to have the mass for it. Okay, you're going to snap it if you try to thin down this thin piece with these thinning flakes, because you also consider them aesthetic. Do the aesthetic stuff last. Don't do the aesthetic stuff first. Alright, unless you have a little teeny slab. It doesn't risk breaking very much. You know, you're not going to risk breaking a little bitty slab as much as a big one like this. So make sure you have some heft in the middle while you're shaping it before you send in your cosmetic flakes. You know, you got to get rid of that square edge. The easiest way is to zigzag. Now some of you guys are breaking these in half. Are you breaking them in the biface stage when it's all flaked, no original surface, or are you breaking them in the slab state with lots of the original surface? Let me know and be specific. Some of you guys are breaking them at this stage when you have a slab and there's a lot of original surface. It just cracks on you in half when you tap the ends or whatever. Some of you are breaking it in the biface stage. That's totally different than breaking it in the slab stage. When there's the slab stage means a lot of the original surface is still on the piece, on both sides, or maybe only on one side. It just, when you have a lot of the original surface still there and you break it, that's you broke the slab. But if you're breaking the biface, that's totally different. So try to specify that in the comments if you have a question on how do you thin it down when it's going to break. I can't seem to thin it to the point where it looks like a point because it breaks. Well, let me know if it breaks at this stage or later on when there's flakes covering the whole surface on both sides, because it's different. How is it different? When it's covered with flakes, your flaking is going to be more opportunistic. See, on this stage, I still do have to pay attention somewhat to where I'm shooting these flakes and set up platforms where I need to in some cases. It's not all opportunistic, but when you've got it napped on both sides so that it's all covered with flakes, it's more opportunistic because sometimes it looks good already. So you're just going to take maybe a lump off here, lump off there, just opportunistically. You know what I mean? If you want to know how to do this systematically, I recommend just looking at the fog nappers, the flake overgrind nappers. They call it skinning when they skin off the original surface. And they do it with parallel flaking many times. A lot of people like that look, the parallel flaking look. Both the napper and the customer, they like that parallel flaking look. But me, I tend to do random flaking. And in the past, random flaking is the most common flaking on artifacts. Okay, so let's start on the other end. Before I get too far into the middle. Yeah, Hornstone is so nice. It's raw too. This is raw stone. And it will not respond to heat, so it does not need to be heat treated. Not only does it not need it, it won't respond to it. It doesn't work on Hornstone. So it's not the usual kind of chert. Most chert can be heat treated, but this for some reason it doesn't like it. Okay, as far as I know. Hope I'm right on that. I could be wrong, but I don't think this needs any heat treating at all. Now let's thin down the end a little bit more. I'm starting to jump around too much. Now that space heater is working pretty well, but it's blowing on one side and I've got the cold air coming in on the other side, so half of me is warm and half of me is cold. And I don't want to put like a tarp or anything over that, because you know these strikes are producing the dust, the dust that causes silicosis. So I want good ventilation in here. And yes, this is inside my van, so I'm gonna have to dust out the van, you know, with they have sometimes at the car wash you have these nozzles that blow air, so I just blow around the air inside the. I use that nozzle to blow out the dust from inside the van or the car or whatever. You don't want it accumulating. Alright, so square edge is gone, except for that side. Let's see. I thought you were going to thin down the ends, man. It's not thin. Yeah. Let's do that. Let's thin it down a little bit more. Somebody wanted me to make a turkey tail a while back, so maybe I'll do that. See how it goes. We'll see how it goes. So yeah, I'm not using any direct percussion. Steel is a little bit harsh on this material. It looks like I might have been more wise to use aluminum. It's not so smashy. Let's see. I can use a swiping technique, or I can use a gouging. Let's see. I'll try a swiping here. I'll set up a little platform and try to swipe this. Yeah, that works okay. The swiping, when it works, it produces very little shock. It's almost like a passive percussion when it's done right. You know, when you remove the flakes on the slide, when you're sliding and then it releases, it's not as shocking as the gouge technique where you just smash into the platform and gouge out a flake. The swiping is more of a passive type of thing where you hit on the slide and you don't know exactly when that flake is going to release. If you do a few thousand, I suppose you can guess, but it removes the flake in a more passive way. Anyway, that's important because if you're working on the ends or on a thin piece, you don't want to shock it too much. This actually should be filed down a little bit better, smoother. Let's see. I thought I had my file out here. Okay. It's going in circles. All right. So I'm showing some direct percussion for you guys who like direct percussion. The swiping is a little more passive than the usual gouging technique that I use. Yeah, it looks kind of messy. It looks a little bit messy, but it's okay. Yeah, I gotta watch out. Too much smashing, it causes radial fractures, or fractures that go in straight, perpendicular to the face. Yeah, the camera's starting to drift. So you may have to bear with the camera issues. We shall see. Then let's thin down the ends. Let's get some thinness down here. The narrowness also helps to reduce the weight on the ends. So it's not just the thinness, but the narrowness also reduces weight on the ends. That's what you want. You want to reduce weight on the ends so you don't snap it in the middle as easily. I just gotta barely catch the edge. So I'm trying to sneak up on it. Just barely catch the edge and swipe those flakes off. If you end up hitting on top like that, you're in trouble. You gotta hit like this on the slide. And if you want more perspective on this technique, just watch Jason Newman videos. Okay. See, I'm trying to catch that, but it's too stout. Or there's a hard spot. So I just thin the edge. I don't know if it's not isolated enough or what. But the flakes aren't going. Oh, that one went easy. I was watching someone the other day. Every time he had trouble removing a flake, he'd go back and grind it again, but then he'd grind every other area instead of focusing on just the area that wasn't working. You don't have to go back over other areas that you're not hitting. If you just concentrate a little bit on that area where you're hitting, should be able to develop an edge that's okay, and then keep going instead of trying to. When it's just this part that you're worried about not being dull enough, just work on that part. Don't dull everything else around it. Like if you're having trouble with one spot and you come back and grind it, you don't need to grind everything else, just that one spot. Just it'll save time. You know what I mean? Because if it gets too dull, you know what happens. You strike and strike and strike, and you need too much power to remove flakes with the strong platform, and you'll crack it in half. All right. Okay, that was pretty good. I am getting worried though that if I hit too hard, I could snap it. But yeah, it follows. When you swipe it, it follows a ridge pretty good. Yeah. I braid this way to lower the platform that way, and then I braid this way to smooth out the platform so it will slide better. You want it to slide. It will catch a little bit, but mostly you want it to slide. Nice. That way you're not pulling. You're not pulling and putting bending stresses on it. So I just did 2 flakes right there. I made sure it was nice and smooth. This is a pretty stout platform. Let's see how that works. Yeah, see, that would have gone if it was on this side. Yeah, a little bit. I had to do a little bit more force on the strong platform, so you got to watch out for that. You don't want the platforms too strong on any technique. If you're working on a thin point, or if you're trying for thinness, there's a balance between too strong and too weak. Sometimes it's too weak, sometimes it's too strong. So if it's too weak, it'll crush, it won't do anything. If it's too strong, you'll hit it with way too much force and crack the whole thing. So I hit it on the slide. Okay, the tip is getting thinner. I'll try to do the same thing on the base. All right, and yeah, I'll probably get rid of that. But I'm gonna thin this down a little bit. I'm holding it. I'm not putting much pressure. I'm just making sure it's a little bit seated. Because I can still crack this thing, yeah. Platform too thin, it crushes. Gotta be careful, I can't hit too hard on this. Let's see. That platform is too strong. So I'm using the corner of the billet to try to get a little gouge. But the whole process is risky down at the base. It's not as risky with indirect percussion. Opportunistic. In case you're wondering what I'm doing, there's really no procedure, just looking for opportunities. Sneaking up on it, I don't want to hit it too hard. I can hit it with one strike, but then it would be too hard. So, you know, I don't want to say most of the time, but sometimes it'll be way too hard. If I just go for one attempt, one flake, it's a little bit too risky. So I want to creep up on it. I'd rather miss than hit too hard. Now on this piece, am I hitting it hard enough to break it? No, I don't want to risk it on this piece. These are expensive. A lot of times I'll hit it hard enough to break it all through the process. But in this case, I'm not hitting it near hard enough to break it in my mind, I think. I mean, I'm pretty certain I know how much force it's going to take to break this one, but I'm not hitting it nearly as hard as that. I'm trying to remove these with the least amount of force as possible, because it is a good material. I shouldn't need much force. Alright, so the ends are thinning a little bit. Okay. Missing is one thing, but missing every time, you don't want to do that. Alright. Okay, so that was that flake there. Okay, so the ends are thinned down. I want to try to keep this general shape from the side view. I'll get rid of that square edge here in a minute. Let's see. You can do it with a billet too, but I feel safer with the indirect percussion stick. This is a stick here. I call it a stick, even though it's a piece of metal. Now the steel, bite into and smash this Hornstone. Yeah, I'm going to switch over to aluminum as soon as I can. But during this initial stage, it's still pretty thick, still pretty big. Not too worried about too much crushing or incipient cracks yet. I can always clean it up. The turkey tail is kind of narrow, right, in some cases. So if I do mess it up with the steel, I still have some width. Okay, continue on the next segment.